So let's start with City when they had the ball in the first half. They built up with a traditional back four, with the full-backs wide, but with Ederson in between the centre-backs to act as the extra man. This meant that it was impossible for Arsenal to match up with City in the press, which gave them a bit more time on the ball. Ederson was often given this time, and he used it to pick out long balls through to Holland, who was 1v1 with Gabriel at the back in order to beat the press. He was 1v1 because Gundogan, who had started higher up, dropped deeper, bringing Saliba with him, due to Arsenal's man-to-man press. This left Gabriel on his own to deal with Holland, although he dealt with it well, and this didn't really come off for City. After moving further up the pitch, City transitioned into the 3-1-6 or 3-diamond-3 shape they've been using all season, with the one change being Gvardiol moving up into the half space instead of Rico Lewis, as Walker was playing instead. It's worth noting how wide the wingers are for City. Both Savigno and Doku stay as close to the touchline as they can to really stretch the Arsenal backline. This was done by quickly switching the play from one side of the pitch to the other, usually through Rodri, until he came off injured, forcing Arsenal to constantly move to try and unsettle their compact structure. When the ball did go wide, City tried to overload the wide areas to open up space centrally. We can see this in City's first goal. Savigno gets past the initial pressure from Calafiori and carries through the centre. Bernardo then moves wide, bringing both Gabriel and Partey with him. Gundogan then makes a run away from Savigno, which forces Saliba to readjust his position, opening up a massive gap between himself and Gabriel for Holland to run into and eventually score. Now we'll have a look at how Arsenal set up out of possession. Arsenal used a man-to-man press against City in their early build-up. Martinelli and Saka are close and ready to press the City fullbacks if it goes wide to them, and Trossard stays tight on Diaz. Declan Rice pushes high up to mark Rodri, and Kovacic later in the game. Partey also steps up to get tight to Bernardo Silva. As mentioned, Saliba stays close to Gundogan even if he drops towards his own box, leaving a 3 versus 3 at the back for Arsenal. Havertz did a great job of pressing both Akanji and Ederson, by using his cover shadow to block the only real passing lane Ederson has, forcing him to go long. After this initial press, Arsenal drop into their usual effective 4-4-2 block. The key as always was to stay compact between the lines and make sure the distances between the players was short. Trossard and Havertz did a good job of blocking a pass into Rodri whilst also applying pressure on the City back three, again using their cover shadow. Martinelli would sometimes push up to press Walker, meaning the rest of the midfield had to shift across accordingly, which they did well. When City got the ball wide, Arsenal made sure to double up on the skillful City wingers. They did this by having Calafiori apply pressure quickly, coming out of position, and the wide player on that side, Martinelli or Saka, come back and support. This big gap left between the full-back and centre-back, which City are famous for exploiting, was then covered by Partey or Rice. The rest of the team then had to shift across to stay compact, limiting any space for City to work in. When Arsenal were building up, they used a 4-2 shape, with Rice and Partey on the edge of the box, with a front four quite high up, to open up space between the City lines. They looked to play short and beat the press, but just like City, they weren't afraid to go long to Havertz. They eventually changed their build-up shape, with Rice pushing up, bringing Gundogan with him, and Timber moving into midfield earlier. David Raya then essentially becomes the right centre-back as Saliba moves wider. This did give Arsenal more joy as they managed to beat the City press more often after this change. Arsenal then looked to form their 3-2-5 shape, which they often do. Rice and Timber were the players who pushed up into the last line most of the time. But rotations between players like Calafiori, Martinelli and Gabriel were key to creating chances against City. When City were without the ball, they set up with a really aggressive press. Gundogan and Bernardo mark the double pivot of Rice and Partey tightly. Erling Haaland presses the goalkeeper and centre-backs, aiming to force the play wide, as Doku and Savigno are ready to jump on the full-backs. This leaves Arsenal with two options: either play a risky pass into the full-back, or go long, which City are comfortable dealing with. The back four of City are extremely aggressive on the Arsenal front four, staying tight even if they go all the way back to their goal. This leaves Rodri as the spare man, just behind the first line of pressure, to pick up any loose balls and any Arsenal player dropping deep. After this initial press, City dropped into a 4-1-4-1 block, trying to stop Arsenal having space to play in. Rodri's role just in front of the back four was important in stopping Havertz from dropping deeper, as he could easily pick him up, meaning a centre-back didn't have to step out of position. In the second half, Arsenal brought on Ben White for Saka to cope with being down to 10 men and shifted to a back five. But this is what the rest of the game essentially looked like, with Arsenal defending their box with a 6-3 or a 5 for not letting City get any space in and around the box. As well as Arsenal defended until the last-minute goal, I thought it was a really poor half from City. In my opinion, the decisions were all over the place. First of all, a glaringly obvious pattern emerged straight away, which was the fact that City were going to have the ball within 25 yards of the goal for the rest of the game, so there was going to be a lot of shots from range. The players in these shooting positions aren't likely to get these on target. So I was surprised it took until the 70th minute for Foden to come on, a player so well suited to shots from this range. Gvardiol has also shown he can score from here too, but was stood in the box for the majority of the half. The second point being, when Foden did come on, he also took up positions in the box where he couldn't get on the ball. This was also true of players like Gundogan and Bernardo, who could find that one pass through, not being in the positions which they could attempt it, instead that responsibility being on players like Diaz and Walker, who aren't really suited to this. One positive is that when Grealish did come on, he was direct with driving into the box and attempting low crosses instead of the many floated crosses City had attempted previously, and this of course led to the winning goal from John Stones.